Welcome to CodeChix. My name is Karen Raymeyer. This CodeChix is a nonprofit organization. We have a website. Why we are here is because women software developers drop out at a tremendously fast rate. Within the first 10 years that women are software engineers, 56% drop out. We want to do something to make that better. So, and you probably know that there's the statistics for women in software is pretty low. It's like 17% or something like that. So about 6 years ago, you'll see as we get there. Oh, another thing, there's a lot of talk about we're not training enough IT people fast enough to fill the jobs that are coming. So there's a few different sources that say at the rate that we're graduating students with computer science degrees, there are likely to be 1 million vacancies soon, like in 7 or 8 years. So we want more people to come into IT, more people to stay in IT, and more women to stay in IT because we have a dropout problem. So CodeChix was created to address that, as were a bunch of other organizations, but CodeChix is the one I know about. This is what our website looks like. We are dedicated to the education, advocacy, and mentorship of female engineers. We have at least 3 different kinds of things: workshops, tech talks, and hack sessions. In Wisconsin, so far, all we have had is tech talks, but we might move to more if we have the interest. So we've been going for almost a year now. CodeChix was started in 2014 in the Bay Area. They had a lot of tech talks in 2014 and a lot of other kinds of workshops. And I looked around and said, wow, that sounds really cool what they're doing, let's have it here. So we started it in 2014. That's what our page of the website looks like. We've had 4 events before this. This is our 5th. We started in July of 2014. I think you can see on our website, these are the past events that we've had. We have links to the pictures, the slides, and the video. We're getting better with getting the videos and the slides up there. Madison College is giving us the videographer and giving us the done videos, and I'm just sticking them up there. So people can watch this if they weren't here, or we're just trying to help more people see what we can do. Here's our mission. We are dedicated to, like I said, the education, promotion, and mentorship of women engineers and students. We are run by local women developers for local women developers. We think that face-to-face helps people stay in the field better. And we are specifically targeting women engineers in the industry on the technical ladder, fresh graduates, women returning to the industry, just doesn't really matter where you are. These are the things that we can do: hacking sessions, workshops, and tech talks. Workshops would be hands-on. We all get together. It's kind of classroom-led. We could probably get rooms for that if we had the interest in that. Hacking sessions would be more, hey, let's all just show up with our laptops and talk about who's doing what and help each other out. To get us started, I've started with tech talks because that's the easiest. All I have to do is announce it on Eventbrite, and people will show up if I have a good enough talk, and find people that will give us talks. And we've so far been quite good at getting people to give us talks. So it's very easy for me to organize that. That's why we've had so far only tech talks. We'll take anybody. It's nice if you know something about software. It's nice if you're technical, but we don't care how new you are to it or how advanced you are to it. What we need is people to show up, people to talk, and spread the word. We have Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and a website. Nationally, we have at least this many sponsors. Locally, we have at least that many sponsors. Madison College has been great at giving us a room anytime. I just send them a little email and they say, yep, here's your room, here's your videographer, here's your everything. So they've been great. You can reach us that way if you want to. And now I'll turn it over to Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm here to talk to you guys about iOS development tonight. But before I start, can I see a show of hands of how many of you have any iOS experience? Okay.
Developing or using?
Any, any, I guess. And what about mobile development in general? Awesome. So I titled this talk as iOS development, but you should be able to take all the concepts you learned about tonight and apply them to any type of mobile development. Before I start talking about that, though, I'd like to introduce myself. So like I said, I'm Emily. I started at Madison College in 2009. I jumped around between programs a lot. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. In 2012, I accidentally walked into an iOS development class. And when we first started learning the language, which was Objective-C at the time, I fell in love and decided that the mobile application development program was the one for me. And I've been working towards that degree since then, and I plan on graduating in May. In 2013, Eric told us about a competition that Apple was hosting. Every year, Apple would invite 25 students down to headquarters for a week to learn about iOS development. In order to apply, we had to create an app that would convert from one currency to another. So I submitted my app, and I got an email back a couple weeks later saying that I had been accepted along with another student at METC. So we went down there for a week in Cupertino, and the events that followed ultimately led to an internship that I completed this past summer. When I found out that I'd be going to Cocoa Camp, I knew I wanted to make an app that I could work on while I was there. But I had to come up with an idea. I've always loved solving puzzles, especially Sudoku, where you have to create this giant mental image of the puzzle in order to solve it. So I wanted to make something kind of like that. But I've also wanted to take advantage of the fact that there's a touch screen. So after brainstorming for a few days, I came up with this. And I called it Connexio. It's a sliding puzzle game where you have to drag colored discs along a network of lines. And in order to solve the puzzle, you have to drag a colored disc to its destination. Now, when you solve the puzzle, you're rewarded based on how many moves you made and how long it took you. You can then submit your score to the leaderboard and compare yourself against other players. Now, this app took me 8 months to make. And you might be thinking, wow, that's a really long time for something this simple. And when I first started on it, I probably would have agreed with you. I probably would have estimated it would take me about 4 months, but it turned out to be double that. And this is a really good example of something you might have heard before, and it's called the 90-90 rule. And what he's saying here, and what I found in my own experience, is that projects often take a lot longer than you think they will. For me, it's twice as long. At 4 months, I felt like the app was almost ready, but every time I finished one thing, 3 more things popped up. It kind of felt like I was walking in the dark, and I knew I was going in the right direction, and I knew I was getting closer, but I just really didn't know how close I was. So I eventually submitted the app in January of last year. Now, since then, I've published a few more apps, and I'm starting to get a hang of the process. So that is what I'm going to share with you guys tonight. Now, keep in mind that this process is just what works for me. I'm not saying that it's the right way to do things, but it could be the basis for what ends up working for you. But instead of just telling you what to do, we're actually going to walk through the process of making an app together. And we're going to be making a Reddit feed. So reddit.com is a website where users can submit links and share them with other users. Now, these links could point to a picture, they could point to a video, or they could point to a website. With millions of users accessing this website every day, there's a seemingly infinite supply of cool things to read, learn, and talk about. So tonight's app will allow us to see the same list of posts from the front page in our app. And it should end up looking like this. So we can see the same list of posts from the front page, and if we click on one, we can see the post itself. Now, this will be a really simple app, but there will be a lot to talk about, and I'm going to go really fast. But don't worry about trying to remember everything. All the material you see here, including all the slides and the source code itself, will be up on my website, and I will have the link to that website on my last slide, and I'll leave that up so you guys can write that down. So let's get started. So the first step is to come up with an idea. Now, if you're really lucky, you will wake up in the middle of the night with this crazy awesome idea, and you'll just be so motivated that you build it the next day. But more often than not, you're actually going to have to do some brainstorming. So there are a few things you should keep in mind when trying to come up with an idea. Now, the most important one is that it be something you're passionate about. You might spend months working on this app, and it should be something that you're going to have fun with, and it'll be easier to stay motivated and keep working on it. It should also be something that you would use. So chances are you already use an app that's kind of like the idea you have. So for example, there might be a calculator app that you use a lot. And it would be really easy for you to make your own calculator app because you know what kind of features the calculator needs to function. And then when you start using your own calculator app instead of the other one, you'll be more motivated to add new features and make it even better because you're using it all the time. If you still don't know what to make, you can always jump in and do some market research. So let's say I want to make a calculator app, but I don't know what kind I want to make. You know, a plain calculator app by itself is not really going to stand out on the App Store. So I want to make a specific type, but I'm not really sure what kind I want to make. So one way to approach this is to use a keyword tool. And that will allow you to see what people are searching for on the App Store. Because if someone's searching for it, there's probably a market there. So an easy way to see what people search for is using a keyword tool like this. So this one allows you to type in a search term, and it will show you what people searched for on the App Store related to this term. So in this example, I want to see what kinds of calculators people are looking for. Now this website returned over 1,000 different searches, but I highlighted a few here that I find very interesting. So for example, people want a calculator app that looks good on an iPad, and they want to be able to calculate things, specific things like finances and mortgages and ages. So maybe I have a background in finance, so maybe this financial calculator would be a good idea to start with. I don't. So tonight we are going to be making a Reddit app, and I got this idea from using way too many poorly made Reddit apps out there. The market's huge, you know, millions of users every day, but the apps kind of suck. You could also say that Reddit is something I'm passionate about, if you can call passion spending way too much time there every day. And it's something I would use every day. So now that we have an idea, we need to do a little more research. We need to see what we're up against with this idea. If we went into this market, we want to know what other people think of the existing apps. And we can do that by looking at the reviews. So I'm highlighting a few of the more harsh reviews here that point out specific faults of the app. So for example, one of these, the app crashes a lot. Another one, it looks nice, but it doesn't quite work. So if we can make sure our app works well and doesn't crash, then we have a leg up against our competition. Now, I'm also pointing out a third type of review here that points out a specific feature that they would want. In this case, they want to be able to swipe between the posts without having to go back and find a new one. So if we can add that to our app, now we have an even better competitive edge. So now that we've settled on an idea, we need to do some more thinking about how we're going to make it. The first thing we need to do is figure out what features we want to include. To do this, ask yourself, what should the user be able to do? So for our Reddit app, we want the user to be able to see the posts that are on the front page. They should also be able to click on a post and see the posted link itself. Now these are the only features we're going to include in tonight's app, but it's also useful to think of what features you might want to include someday. So I listed a few features that we would actually have to implement if we were going to put it on the store, but for the sake of time, we're going to skip these tonight. The next thing to think about is what kind of technical capabilities our app is going to use. So probably the most common one is having a web server that acts as a back end for the app. For example, if we were making a game, we might want to store players' high scores in a leaderboard. We would use a database. If we wanted to reward them with some beautiful artwork every time they win a level, maybe we want to store those images on the server itself. We don't want users to be able to update other users' scores, so we need to use authentication to keep track of who's who. And if we want to send a notification to a user when someone else beat their high score, we would use Apple's push notification service. Now, there are a few options when trying to determine how you want to implement your backend. For my smaller projects, I often use just a basic web server, and I write all the backend code in PHP. But there are other options that do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So they're called a backend as a service. They're really useful if you don't want to write much code and you want it to go really fast, but it often costs more in the long run than doing it yourself. But for our app tonight, we won't need any web server. All of our content will be downloaded from Reddit, and we won't be adding any functionality beyond what Reddit already provides. So in addition to technologies outside of the app, there are a lot of tools you could take advantage of inside the app too, and they're usually accessed using Apple's set of frameworks. And here are some of the more popular ones. But tonight, we are just going to use CodeChix. Now, I use CodeChix to draw all of the icons and graphics and shapes that are in my app, instead of using images that are created in Photoshop or Illustrator. And because all of the graphics are created in code, the project size stays really small because it's not littered with hundreds of different image sizes, at all the different sizes and formats. And the graphics also look really sharp on the device because they're drawn on the fly relative to the screen size. So we've done some brainstorming, we've done some planning. Now we got to start thinking about what the app will look like. And this is my personal favorite part. So a good way to figure out what it's going to look like is to ask yourself, what will the user be able to see? So if we look back at the features we defined earlier, we need to think about what kinds of user interface elements will be needed to make these features work. So when we browse posts on the front page, what we're seeing is a list of posts, and we should be able to scroll through them, and we should be able to click on one and see the post itself. Now on iOS, this idea of being able to scroll through a list of items and click on one can be achieved by using a table view. The second idea of being able to click on one and have a more detailed view show up is achieved by using a navigation controller. So if we implement these two types of ideas, it will end up looking like this. We have a title at the top of our post page, and we have a back button on our post screen. Now these sketches might not look like much, but they will end up being the foundation for all of the coding and design process that happens next. But so far, all we know is that we have a list of posts. We don't actually know what they're going to look like. How do we know what they're going to look like? What will the user be able to see? So let's look back at what the post looks like on Reddit's website. So I pointed out the few details that we're actually going to care about tonight. Every post has a title and a score. Every post is associated with a subreddit. But not every post has a thumbnail, so we'll have to keep that in mind when we're designing the cell. And this is where I take out my notebook and my pens and I start drawing. I prefer graph paper over regular lined paper. It makes it easier for drawing screens that actually look symmetrical. And my favorite pens of all time are these Sharpie pens. They are markers, but they are fine-tipped markers. And they come in lots of fun colors, and they last until you lose them. And I lose them often. So now we know what the user will be able to see, this list on the side, we can actually get creative and start designing our post. So maybe I decide to draw the thumbnail here, and the score here, and the title here, and the subreddit here. Now it seems to fit okay, but it's kind of plain, so maybe we decide to add a star to the post cell. So now the user can favorite a post by clicking on the star and it will turn orange. But now we have to remember that not every post is a thumbnail, so maybe those cells look like this. Now if we add some more cells to fill our table view, and we wrap the navigation controller around it, it starts to look pretty good. Now remember, when the user clicks on one of the cells, another screen should pop up that shows us the list, or the post itself. So let's draw that navigation controller. Now it only has a nav bar and a little back button on it. Now, the thing about Reddit is users can post anything. It could be a picture, video, website, or anything in between. So for the sake of time, instead of trying to figure out what was posted and show it in the best format that it could be for that type of post, we're going to cheat and use a web view, which is pretty much just like embedding a web page right into the app. So instead of trying to figure out what kind of link was posted, we open the link in the web view, and they can see it as if they were in Safari or another web browser. So we have our idea, we know how we're going to make it, and we know what it should look like. The next step is to roll up our sleeves and start writing some code. So around this time last year, the only programming language Apple provided was Objective-C. But at WWDC last June, they announced a new programming language called Swift. Now, I won't get into the details about how they're different. Just know that you can use either one at this point. Regardless of the language you use, you'll use Xcode to write and compile your application. So Xcode is Apple's development environment, and it's free for download from the Mac App Store. Now, when I start a new project, I like to start with the single view application template. It comes with the least amount of extra code. What it does come with is something called a storyboard. Now, a storyboard lives in Interface Builder, and Interface Builder is a graphical drag and drop editor that allows you to put together screens. If we ran this app, it would look pretty much like this, but we didn't write any code. That's because Interface Builder writes the code for us. It's a really powerful tool that can allow developers to develop apps quickly and easily, and there are hundreds of tutorials out there that can teach you how to do Interface Builder. But tonight, I'm going to show you how to do it all in code. So once we have our application set up, we need to start by making the first screen. So remember that we decided to use something called a navigation controller, which gives us a nice title bar, and we decided to use a table view for our list of posts. So let's start by making that navigation controller in table view. So I created two new classes, and we can see in the simulator on the right that we have our title bar and we have our table view. Now this is what a table view looks like when it's empty. Now we could go ahead and design our cell, but we don't have any data yet to populate it. So lucky for us, Reddit makes it really easy to access their data from their front page, and you can download it in a popular format called JSON. So Reddit makes it so easy that you can add .json to the end of any Reddit URL, and it will give you the JSON version of that page. So here's an example of a single post that I pulled off the front page. I highlighted the 4 details that we mentioned earlier, and now that we know how to see it in the browser, we have to figure out how we can download it into our app. So there's a really awesome API called NSURL session, and it allows us to make an HTTP request to this URL, and we'll get the response back, and it should look the same as it did in the browser. So if we run it, and we log our response to the console, it looks like this. So we can see we have a list of posts represented as JSON, and it looks like it did in the browser as we expected. Now you may notice I created a new class over there to hold all the network calls because I like to keep them separate from the rest of the app. So now that we have our data in the JSON format, I like to make a new class that will hold this data in a more meaningful format. So I created a class with a custom initializer that accepts our JSON data, and it will pull out the values that we want and store them in properties. So now that we have it in the format we want, we can actually start making our post cells now to fill our table view. So let's look back at the post cell we drew earlier. We have an image for the thumbnail, we have some labels for the text, and we have a button with our star on it. Now this is the part where we diverge from the idea of using Interface Builder. And we're going to create the elements, configure them, add them to the cell, resize them, and lay them out all in code. So if we start by making a class for our cell, we can create properties that will hold each of our interface elements. And I will refer to these elements from now on as subviews. So when the table is asked to create a cell, like in this method here, we create a new instance of our post table view cell. And we tell it to initialize all of the subviews of the cell, as you can see in the method shown here at the bottom. The next thing our table does is tell our cell to add all of the subviews. Now what this does is it takes all the subviews and it puts them into the cell's view hierarchy. So now we can lay them out, but we haven't actually told them where to be yet. So subviews have a property called frame. And by setting this, you can tell the subview how big it should be and where on the screen it should be. So we need to find a good place to set all of the frames for our subviews. Now, as it turns out, our cell view recognizes a method called layout subviews. And this method is called automatically every time the cell is shown, every time one of the subviews is added or removed, or if a subview's frame is changed. So this is the method where I like to set all of my frames for the subviews. Now, if you can remember, we defined a property of our cell. We defined a subview earlier that was called points value label. And I want to set its frame. But I haven't actually defined a frame yet to set it to. Oops, wrong button. So I like to create a method that will return this frame. And I called it frame for points value label. That's a very Objective-C name for methods. If we put them together, now we can set the label's frame by using the rectangle that was returned from our method. I also like to set other things like font sizes in this method too, because sometimes font sizes could be related to the frames of some other subviews. So if we implement the methods for all of our subviews that return the frames for the subviews, and we put them in place, we can see how it looks. And it looks a lot like our design, which is good. This is usually the part where I spend a while, tweaking, padding, font sizes, maybe the font itself, moving things around, but I think it's okay for now. The only thing that's missing, though, is our star button. Now, we could download a star image off the internet, or we could even make one in Photoshop or Illustrator. But along with tonight's app, we're going to do it all in code. So this is where CodeChix comes in. This framework allows you to draw onto a context, and you can draw things like text, Bezier paths, other images, and it's all resolution independent, which means it'll look good on any device because it's drawn on the fly relative to the screen size. Now, rarely do I ever use actual image assets in my apps. I almost always use CodeChix. It looks really nice, and I don't have a ton of image files filling up my project. Now, to give you an example of how much space you can save by not using images, this is how big my app is on the store right now, 1.1 megabytes. A good comparison of size, there's an image next to it that is 4,500 pixels by 3,000 pixels that is much larger than my entire app on the store. If I had used images instead of code, it probably would have been about 100 megabytes. Now in CodeChix, if I wanted to draw a triangle, it would look kind of like this. Now with CodeChix, everything is drawn relative to the screen size. Now remember, our layout method, where we set all of our frames, we're drawing inside of those frames here. The coordinates that are used to draw the points are fractions of the frame's size. So no matter what size the frame is, it will look really sharp. So if we can take our knowledge of drawing shapes, it's pretty straightforward to draw a star. So we create a new star class, we add our CodeChix code, and it looks pretty good. All we have left now is to be able to click on the post itself and see the link that was posted. So if we make one final class, and this class is responsible for showing our web view, it will look like this. Now it looks like we've implemented all of our features. And it might be tempting to think that just because it works, we're done. But that is far from true. This step is probably the most important one of them all. If there is a bug or something that doesn't work, your user will find it, and they will probably be very upset if it crashed while they were doing something important. And they may even be so unhappy that they leave a really negative app on your store. So make sure to pay just as much attention to this step as all the others. So for starters, always test on a device. So far tonight, we've only run our app in the simulator. And that's okay to see how something looks or to see how a feature is going to work. But it's going to run very different than it would on a device. The simulator has the full power of your processor and your memory capabilities, unlike your device. And your device may actually have smoother animations than the simulator itself. So they're very different. There are also a lot of features that aren't supported by the simulator. For example, hardware features like Bluetooth and motion sensing, accelerometers and gyroscopes, and camera and microphone, among other things. Now, in the iOS world, in order to get your app on your device takes a bit of work. Apple requires that you have provisioning files set up in order for your device to even accept your app. And in order to have these provisioning files, you have to sign up for a license. And this license costs just under $100 a year, but it gives you access to all of the resources you would ever need for developing apps, iOS apps. So once you have your developer license and you have all your provisioning files set up, we can run it on the device. And the first thing I like to do is to make sure all the features are working correctly. If I was in a hurry and I didn't test on a device, I might have missed a bug that is only present on the device. The next thing I like to do is to try and make it crash. So when we're creating an app, we tend to use it in very predictable ways because we know how it should work. But if someone else came in and used our app, they wouldn't know how to use it. They might press buttons in the wrong order. They might press 2 buttons at the same time. They might leave form fields empty. And all of these things could make your app crash. So try to use the app from your user's perspective. You can even ask your friends or your family to try it out because often they will be able to crash your app without even trying. Also, try to run it on as many different devices as you can find, as many different screen sizes, and as many different operating systems. And at least try and test on the devices and operating systems that you are supporting. I like to keep old devices around that I don't use anymore and use them just for development. I also like to analyze the performance of the app running on the device. So Xcode provides this really awesome tool called Instruments. And it lets you collect data from your running application, and it will let you visualize the behavior in real time. I like to use it to check for memory leaks. If memory leaks go untreated, they tend to consume more and more memory until the app finally crashes. And this is usually caused by not releasing an object when it's not needed anymore. Now, the nice thing about Instruments is it allows you to see every object in memory, and it's very easy to see which ones you're not releasing. So our app's not crashing, and our app is not consuming too much memory, but are we done? Not quite. We test again. So when I was at this point with my app, I had already been working on it for about 7 months. I was so ready to be done with it, I just wanted to put it on the store and get over with it. But I hit a snag, and I had to wait another 2 weeks. Now, I had already spent 2 weeks testing, and now I got to spend another 2 weeks testing, and I found so many bugs that I had missed the first round. And if I would have jumped the gun and released it right away, there would have been many unhappy users. So I'm really glad that I had spent that extra time testing. So we've considered all the cases, we've tested all the features, and we're ready to actually start the submission process. Now, this process usually takes anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks. Once you've submitted your app, there is a whole review process that it goes through. Now, most of this time is actually spent in waiting. They don't actually look at your app until a period of time has passed. The actual review process, it only takes about an hour to 2 hours, during which an Apple employee will open up your app for a few seconds, make sure it doesn't crash, make sure you're not using any private APIs, and then once they approve it, it should be on the store within 24 hours. There are a few things we should prepare, though, before we actually submit. The most important one is to make sure that we followed all the rules. So Apple provides this living document that shows you what behaviors are acceptable and what behaviors are prohibited. And if we don't follow the rules, our app will be rejected. We also need to make sure that our provisioning files are now switched from development mode to production mode. They are different, so we'll have to make sure we have those set up before we submit. We also have to prepare the graphics that will be shown on the App Store. This includes screenshots. You can have up to 5, and now a video, but you'll have a different set of screenshots for each different device and screen size. And you'll also need to come up with the app icon itself. And you'll probably upload up to 9 different versions, different sizes of the same app icon. We also have to prepare the metadata. So this would include the app's name, any description that we want to give it, any keywords that we want the user to be able to search for, and any categories that it would be grouped into. And last but not least, we need to consider the price. So for example, my experience, the first year that my app was on the store, it was up for $2. And I sold a couple hundred copies. And then about a year later, I decided to release it as free. The next day, it had 3 times as many downloads as it did the whole year before it. And the next day, twice as the day before. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to decide how much you want to list it for. But there are other ways to generate revenue in an app. There's in-app purchases, so the app could be free, but they have to pay for certain features. Or you could implement an ad setting. So Apple provides a framework called iAd, where you can embed an ad right in your application, and you will get paid for it. So once we've prepared everything for the submission process, we actually have to tell Apple about our new app. And we use their web-based development portal called iTunes Connect. So if we fill out all the information that we prepared, and it's all put in there, then we go back to Xcode to actually submit the application. So all the submission process happens in Xcode itself. It zips up the app, and it acts as a first filter that lets us know if there's anything obvious that would cause a rejection. But if it's good, and it's submitted, and then we wait. Now, if you're curious how long the wait time is at this point, there's a really cool website that gathers data from Twitter. So developers can tweet how long the review time was, and it's shown here on this website. So it usually sits around 5 to 10 days, but around the holidays, it could take weeks. And when you finally get that email that says that your app was approved, it is a really cool feeling. And this is the point, if you haven't done it already, you should tell everyone you know, family, friends, coworkers, get the word around. A lot of developers also set up social media accounts. So they'll set up a Twitter account and they'll tweet about progress. And then you get a following together, and then you release a new app, and you already have a good base of people that will be interested to see what you've made. So like I said, this is just the process that works for me. Your mileage may vary, but I'm hoping that this is useful to you so that maybe you can take this information and apply it to your own development process. So that's all for tonight. I thank you for having me, and I'm open to any questions. So this is the first one. Can you guys guess what you have to do? And then if I look at the leaderboard, I can see that, let's see how far down I am now. So
Which one are you? 113.
Yeah. There's quite a few on that first one. And see, I did it in 0.08 of a second, and I'm number 113 on the leaderboard. So the second level then, this is the one you saw in the presentation. I have to move this one out of the way before I can put this one up here. Because I can try to move.
How do you know which one you put?
The color of the circle,
Okay.
open circle, then you have
Okay.
to find the one of the same color and move it up there.
I see.
So when I click on one, I can see which lines I can actually move it on. And I can move it out of the way. So they get kind of tricky. So I'll show you the last one of the first chapter. So there's only one color to get to the end, but
I didn't get that far.
so I did that in 54 moves. But if we go to a more difficult, so now this is the second chapter, so now we have to move 2 rings up to the finish. So I can do both of them. But now, I have to move this one out of the way. But I'll show you an example of one where you have to do one before the other. So this one right here. So if I try to get the pink one down here, I can't actually do it. I have to solve the yellow one first, and now I have 2 open spaces instead of just 1. So now I can move these out of the way, get one of the bottom ones out, and now I can move the pink one down into its position. And oh boy, I got a faster score, so I'm going to submit to leaderboard. Player. Let's see how I ranked. 24, okay, that's not bad. But I did it in more moves than other people had done.
Well, because you were showing
Yes, yeah. So then I also have a create mode. So I was just testing. By the way, if you download it and you don't want to have to solve them all, if you put this, if you make this, it will unlock all the levels for you.
Yeah.
You probably didn't know that.
No.
But I was testing this. So I can make one. Now I solved all 4 chapters, so now I can make all 4 different colors. So if I drag that one there. I create lines. Then I save it. Then I can play it. And I solved it. And that's pretty much it.
When someone creates it, is it available to everyone else to use then also, or just?
It's not. I thought about doing that, and I actually, I have a way where I can make the apps in here and upload them, and then you guys can download them. But I didn't make it available for other players to be able to do that. You know,
Risky business.
8 months later, I just want to get it done with, kind of thing. You know.
Yeah.
So someday, maybe.
That's wonderful. Cool.